Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Okay, Craig, it is February 2018. We have decided we're going to go with another theme month this month. It is the second month of the year, so why not do twos?
Yep, I like it.
So let's start out. I tell you what, let's do notorious number 2 horror films. They can't just be the sequel to the series. They have to be a sequel that in some way, shape, or form has made some kind of impact, right? Like gone off the rails or completely changed direction or it was really terrible or something like that. Honestly, the very first movie that came to my mind was Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Freddy's Revenge.
Mm-hmm.
This film is often hailed as the worst in the series, although it has been, it's been kind of revised throughout history a little bit. There's a very complicated background to this film. So anyway, it really stands out. It really stands out among the franchise. That is why we chose it today. I think this movie came out, and I mean, neither of us would have seen this in the theaters, but I do remember the posters,
the big cardboard cutouts at the video stores.
Yeah, Freddy's kind of like looking around the corner or something like that. He's got flames behind him. It was really pretty... It was maybe my very first introduction to the character of Freddy, quite honestly, is looking at this burned up guy in this cardboard stand and going, who is that? It looks really scary. But then the third film came along after this and really hit a cultural touchstone, and that was the movie that was super popular with everybody, and all of my friends anyway at school. This movie seems to have been somewhat relegated to the dustbin of New Line cinema. Anyway, Craig, your history with this film?
I don't know. I think that the first one was the first one I saw. It was kind of the deal where my dad had it on VHS, and I wasn't supposed to watch it, but of course that made me want to watch it, so I snuck and watched it, and I thought I was young, it was really scary, and I really enjoyed it, and then I don't remember when I saw the sequel, and I really don't remember what my initial response was to it. Ultimately, yeah, I would say that it's probably my least favorite in the series, but it's certainly interesting to talk about. I mean, just the kind of the backstory of how it came to be and what the production ended up being is really more interesting than the plot, even though the plot is interesting too, which we'll get to soon. But I guess because the first one was so successful, they immediately wanted to pump out a sequel, because as successful as the first one had been, they had pumped so much money into selling it that their profit margin was actually pretty narrow. But they saw a lot of potential, and so they wanted to get a sequel going right away, and so they fast-tracked it. They got a script written by, well, first of all, Wes Craven didn't want to have anything to do with the sequel. In fact, he was kind of pissed off that they were trying to make this into a franchise. He never wanted that to be the case. In fact, it was Bob Shaye who forced him to change the ending of the first movie to an open-ended ending for the potential for a sequel. Craven didn't want to do that at all. He wanted the ending of the first movie to end happily, for it all to just kind of been a dream, and Nancy and all of her friends were fine, and they rode off into the sunset or whatever. But Bob Shaye was adamant that they have that open-ended nightmare-type ending. And so they couldn't get Craven. He wasn't interested. And so they got a writer named David Chaskin, and he's written a few other movies. The only thing that I really recognized was The Curse, which was another horror movie from the 80s starring Will Wheaton. Not a great movie, but I always kind of liked it. And then the director was Jack Shoulder, who, again, has done some stuff, but not a whole lot. He did Wishmaster 2, which was still when Wishmaster was halfway decent. So, I mean, these weren't completely inexperienced people. But and then they filmed it really fast. They had a really limited time for both production and post-production. They wanted to get it out pretty much like 1 year after the release of the first one, and they did. But what's interesting to me about this one of the many things, is that it really changes the rules almost entirely. Like, whereas in the first movie, Freddy was kind of this dream demon who got to these teenagers through their dreams and was able to interact with them and harm them in their dreams. And of course, then there were some fuzzy gray lines where, like, if you could grab onto him and pull him out, he could be brought out into the real world, and then he could be harmed and those types of things. This one is very different. I mean, this one really is more like a haunted house movie.
Exactly.
Where you've got this malevolent spirit who can manipulate the physical real world, and whose goal it is to possess a human host so that he can continue doing his killing and bad stuff. It's totally different than the first movie, and it removes the dream aspect almost entirely, and that,
yeah,
you know, that's the foundation really for this whole series. And like you said, with part 3, they course corrected and went back to that, and you know, of course, they continued to build the mythology from there. But this one was really a major change, and they did other things like, you know, it's so typical. It was so typical then. It's so typical now that in these types of slasher movies, you have a final girl, and in this one, the protagonist is a guy, and that in and of itself is different and unique. Not necessarily bad, but just unexpected. And then you get into this whole issue, which at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of light shed on it. There were some rumblings. Some people were talking a little bit. But there are these... Well, let me just say this. When you look it up on IMDb, if you look at the IMDb plot words for the movie, the plot words are gay, homoeroticism, gay subtext, jockstrap, and Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. he's way down at the bottom, right behind jockstrap. Right. That is interesting. That's true. If you Google it, you're going to pop up a BuzzFeed article that calls this the gayest horror film ever made, and that has been a moniker that kind of got stuck on it maybe a couple decades ago. And this is a reason why people have revisited it with a little bit more fondness than I think in the subsequent years. What's interesting about it is if you go back and you look at the history, Mark Patton really, really hates... I think now he's embracing a little bit of, okay, it's kind of a better time for him to be able to embrace it now that attitudes towards homosexuality have changed so drastically in the last decade.
Right.
But in the intervening periods, he really credited this movie with ruining his career because... Even though, you know, there's a lot of gay people in acting and in Hollywood, it still just wasn't something that you flaunted. And He felt like this movie, in a way, outed him. And he felt not just that happened, but that it was almost a deliberate... Well, first of all, he said the writer wrote it in, which was something that, you know, the writer denied. David Chaskin denied for many years until it was safe for him to say, okay, yeah, I actually wrote it in considerably, and duh. Jack Shoulder claimed to be completely ignorant, and I think he probably was. Like, even Mark Patton says that a lot of the people on the production were just dumb straight guys who had no idea what was going on. But he still thinks that Shoulder in people, decisions were made on the set, changes were made to the script and to some of the scenes that, whether it was intended or not, just seemed to throw even more gasoline on this, you know, gay fire of the film.
It was intended. I mean, like, well, I mean, come on. The writer subsequently admitted that, you know, he wrote the subtext in.
Well, no, and it's just I don't deny that. Of course he did. Of course he did.
Right. No. I'm just saying, for anybody, I just can't imagine how anybody could say they didn't know. Like, I mean, I guess... I've never, you know, been in a major motion picture or anything like that, so I understand maybe there would be some surprises, you know, when you see the film and you see the actual cut of it, you know, there may be some undertones that you didn't really realize were there when you were standing in front of a camera performing or when you were standing behind the camera recording or whatever. Mm-hmm. But this is so bold on its face. Like, and I get that it was a different time and these things weren't talked about as commonly, and, you know, homosexuality wasn't represented as much in film, especially mainstream film and especially horror. I mean, you never saw, really, unless they were joke characters, gay characters in horror movies. And, but, oh my God, I mean, when we get into the plot, I mean, it's just so obvious. And I don't want to be stereotypical, that's mean. But Mark Patton, the guy who plays the main guy, Jesse, is kind of an effeminate guy. Like, he's not over the top, like, swishy or anything like that. But he's just kind of got an effeminate quality to him. He's kind of pretty. Mm-hmm. And, and then the decisions that were made for his character... It's gay.
Very, very true. But I can see. I'm just gonna defend Jack Shoulder just a little bit, whether or not he deserves it. If you're a director of a film, you have a billion things on your mind. You're filming the film, out of sequence. Sometimes you miss the forest for the trees, I think. And there are scenes in here. Obviously, there's like a kind of an S&M scene and whatnot with the coach, but. The coach, there are comments made about the coach early in the film.
How much longer do you think he's going to keep us out here?
It could be all night. The guy gets his rocks off like this. Hangs around queer S&M joints downtown. I got a car. He likes pretty boys like you.
Get out of here.
If you're shooting those scenes and you're the director, you're kind of thinking that you're not necessarily thinking this is playing to the kids' problems. You're thinking, okay, this is just a manifestation of how they feel about this guy. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna fall all over. I don't care if Jack Shoulder, whatever. I'm just saying. I think it's plausible that there's a bit of a mix. That yes, clearly David Chaskin knew what he was doing. There were probably several people on that set who knew what they were doing. Robert Englund himself at one point wanted to get Freddy's finger in his mouth.
Yeah, in a totally homoerotic scene.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously we're going out of context, but at one point, Freddy basically is courting this kid. All right, so Jesse is a new kid in town. They move into Nancy's house, the Elm Street house, Freddy's house, that's been sitting abandoned for a really long time. And so he's this new kid, and he's ever since he's been there, he's like having these night terrors. Like the first scene, he's on a school bus. And it's, doing a school bus thing, driving down the street, picking kids up, dropping kids off and stuff. And he's just sitting there, and he's kind of gross and greasy and sweaty, and he's sitting in the back, and nobody's talking to him. Eventually, it's just him and a couple other girls left on the bus, and they're laughing at him and making fun of him. And then all of a sudden, the bus starts to go crazy, and it's like flying down the street, and it runs into this desert, and there's lightning, and we see that the bus driver has now... We see his arm shift the gears, and it's Freddy's arm with the glove, and eventually the ground falls away, and the school bus is suspended just on this big pillar of rock, and everybody's screaming. And then we cut to a very domestic, right away, very quick cut to a domestic scene of a woman slicing tomatoes, and we hear it's a small family, a mom and dad and a little girl, and we hear from upstairs this very high-pitched girl-like scream. And I knew it was Jesse. I've seen the movie. And frankly, if I, and probably any man, were really terrified, that's probably what their natural, real, scared scream would sound like. But it's certainly not Butch. And he screams his way through this whole movie. He actually is, he kind of, again, he was upset by it initially, but now he's kind of embraced it. In fact, he kind of refers to himself as the first male scream queen, and he really is. But anyway, he's been having these night terrors, and just right away, he sits up in bed, he's all sweaty like he's greased up, he gets up and walks around in his tighty-whities, Oh, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm reading into it, but when you're looking for it, it's right there in front of your face.
It's definitely there. Yeah.
Oh man.
No, there's no question. No question. So this kind of establishes this house, like you said. This is kind of a haunted house movie in a way. It establishes the house as a supernatural place, right? Because he's the only one. In the first film, all these kids, were having these nightmares and these dreams, and Freddy was trying to get to them. In this case, he is the only one who is having bad dreams at all. And it's connected to the house because obviously they just moved in. And there's a later scene here where Jesse goes to the basement of the house. There's a furnace down there, and he reaches in and he pulls out the glove that's wrapped up. Now, was Freddy's glove wrapped up in the first film? Did it come into the real world and
yes,
get
it was
stashed
there.
in
Remember
there?
the mom had it. She
Oh,
I
that's
guess
right.
She took it when
That's
they
right.
burned him or whatever, and she had it in the furnace or whatever.
Oh, that's right.
I can't imagine it would still be there. And there's other stupid stuff like that. Like he has this girlfriend named Lisa, and she's played by a girl named Kim Myers, who is recognizable. She was in Hellraiser 4, but I think that the reason that she's so recognizable is she bears a striking resemblance to a young Meryl Streep.
Oh, yeah.
She looks so much like her, and if you read trivia about it, there are some places that will say that's why they cast her. But Mark Patton, the guy who plays Jesse, has said, no, I was in on the casting, and we definitely picked her because she was the best for the role, and blah, blah, blah. But whatever. She looks just like Meryl Streep. But at some point, she's helping him unpack his room, and she's putting things away in the closet, and she's like, oh, what's this? And she pulls out this old dusty book, and of course, it's Nancy's diary.
Which, by the way, inside the closet, the only other thing in this closet is a Parker Brothers game called Probe.
Yeah. And like on Jesse's door, there's a sign that you can barely read, but if you can read it, it says "No chicks allowed." Like, come on!
But that's a typical thing for teenagers to put on there. You're right. If you put all of these things together, of course, it all adds up.
Oh gosh, and so basically, but you were talking about like how there's weird stuff about the house. And it seems like he's dreaming some of these things, but it's really unclear if he's dreaming or if he's awake.
Yeah.
Because it seems like sometimes he's awake when he's seeing Freddy, like, throwing body parts into the furnace underneath the house. And all of this is having an effect on all of the people in the house. Like, they keep talking about how hot it is, and, the air conditioning must be broken, and, it's because you've got some ghost in the basement burning the furnace all the time.
Firing up the furnace in the middle of the night.
Yeah, it's weird.
Oh, and there's scenes in here, where there's that point of view shot, kind of like in what was the movie we watched? Was it The Omen 2 or something, where it's a point of view of, like, from the furnace, and then it goes up the stairs, and it goes through the house, and then up into the bedroom, and things like that.
Yeah,
these typical
Amityville too.
Ghost things. Later on, there's a scene where Jesse comes down, and he's constantly asking about the house. At one point, or somebody mentions, actually, I think that was his friend Grady, right?
Yeah, his hot friend Grady, who he totally has the hots for.
Yeah, let's say the only other friend in this whole movie.
Right.
He wants to spend the most time with, the one he really goes to when he's having trouble. It's
right.
Like the girl comes to him, but he goes to Grady.
Always. And I can understand why. Grady's a good-looking guy.
Yeah, he looks good. He's well built, too.
You tell me you moved into that big white house with the bars in the window?
Yeah, what about it?
Shit, you can tell your old man he's a real chump.
What are you talking about now, Grady?
Some chick was locked in there by her mother and she went crazy. She watched her boyfriend get butchered across the street by some maniac.
There's this Coach Snyder, and they're all playing ball, and I don't remember, something happens.
Grady pantses him. He pulls his pants down.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And his bare butt is hanging out in the wind. And then the coach comes over and is like, all right, dirtbags, assume the position. And they have to get down on the ground. Oh, yeah, and that's when he talks about how Grady, hangs out at gay S&M bars and stuff. And that's another thing about this movie, and this kind of holds true for the franchise. And, there's a logic to it that the town wants to keep these stories under wraps because I guess they know if kids are talking about it, then bad things will happen or whatever. But this was supposed to have happened 5 years ago. How would these teenagers not know? They would know. But anyway, they don't. But
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. So, and then we see another dream, I guess, where Jesse sees Freddy burning stuff in the basement, and so then he goes and he, like, opens the door to the basement, and he sees him down there, and so he pulls it closed, and then, like, Freddy's trying to pull it open from the other side, and he turns to run, and Freddy's right there. And that's where we get this really weird scene where they're standing super close together, face to face, and Freddy takes his glove and is just stroking this kid's face, and then he uses his fingers, too, and he's saying things like,
I need you, Jesse. We got special work to do here, you and me. You've got the body. I've got the brain.
Talking about this young kid's body, and that becomes the whole premise. Freddy really, really wants to get into this young boy's body. And he's going to do whatever he can. But that's the scene that you were talking about where Robert Englund wanted to put his claw in Jesse's mouth, but Patton would not go for it. Like, I guess that was just the one step too far, you know? And supposedly, I guess the makeup artist told Patton, you don't want to do that. This is not going to be good for your image.
Yeah.
So he screams and he wakes up, and then there's a weird part where he's in class and he falls asleep, and somehow, like, it's like Grady sees that he's sleeping, and then all of a sudden there's an enormous snake crawling all over him and, like, caressing his face, and he wakes up and screams. And, you know, I thought that this was pretty typical because this happens a lot in these movies. Somebody falls asleep in class, something scary in the dream world happens, they wake up, everybody looks at them weird. But no, when he wakes up, there really is a giant snake on him, and the teacher comes and takes it off. Like, how did it get there?
Yeah, I know. The teacher's like, you're not going to play with animals during my lecture. Like, what? How did this snake just found its way around this kid? You're right. It messes with the mythology considerably. Now Freddy can affect things in the real world. It's really unclear how the dreams are connected or whether or not he's even dreaming with a lot of these things, like you said. So, so he's a haunted kid, right?
Right. And, you know, in hindsight, now everybody's talking about it, and they say, well, the whole thing is intended to be a metaphor for his latent homosexuality and him trying to keep his demons inside and not allow them to come out. And okay. Sure, why not? The next scene is one of my favorites where, okay, so he wants to go out, but his dad's making him unpack his room, so he goes up to his room and does a dance to the song Touch Me All Night Long, where he dances and he thrusts his butt into the dresser drawer to get it closed, and then he grabs some sort of phallus and jumps onto the bed and starts simulating masturbation with it, at which point his mother opens the door, and the girl, Lisa, is there with him, and something pops off the end. What was? I don't even know what he was playing with, but he's like stroking it, and then right as soon as they open the door, something shoots off the end.
It's like,
oh my god!
It's like, and it's all in close up. Like all of these little bits are really zoomed in on. It's not like this dance is done in a wide shot.
It was supposed to be an homage to Tom Cruise's dance in Risky Business, and I see that it is relatively similar, but there are certainly more suggestive things going on here than there were there. But it's really kind of funny, and I guess that he was really reluctant, the actor was really reluctant about doing it, and he kept getting them to postpone it in production, and then finally he did it. And there are various accounts of this too. The director said that Patton came to him and said, look, I'm nervous about doing it, but I've worked on the moves. You know, just roll the camera and we'll see what happens. And Mark Patton says, no, that's absolutely not true. Every little bit of it was scripted, and he just did exactly what it said for him to do in the script. But it's hilariously funny, one way or the other.
It is. It is funny. Okay, so at this point, does the tiny bird start attacking everybody? I don't. I mean, there's some of this stuff is rather silly. There's somewhere in this mix. Again, this is something that happens in the real world. They have these tiny little birds, and
like love birds.
Yeah, one bird gets loose and just starts attacking the family. And I'm thinking, just reach up and grab the bird.
Well, yeah, and not only that, it's this tiny bird. Well, first it kills the other bird, and then it's flying all around, and it's pretty funny to watch. And then it explodes.
It explodes! Exploding bird.
And then the dad's like mad, and he's like, animals don't just explode. There's got to be some sort of rational reason. And so he accuses Jesse of somehow
setting it up,
blowing it up with a cherry bomb.
He's just like, you set this whole thing up. Like, what? For what purpose and why and how? The dad in this movie is... they're obviously going for this particular archetype, the father who doesn't believe anything that's going on. There's a rational explanation behind everything. He just blames his son for everything that happens.
Right.
Even when his son is clearly in distress and clearly troubled, he's like, what are you on? Just tell me the drugs you're on. And when the mother wants to take him to therapy...
He needs professional help. I think we have to take him to see a psychiatrist.
Oh, come on, Cheryl. You out of your gourd. What the hell will that do?
I don't know. I just feel he needs help, and we don't know how to give it to him.
Oh, come on, Cheryl.
Are you hearing me? That boy's in trouble.
No, he's not in trouble. What that boy needs is a good goddamn kick in the butt. That's what he needs.
It's just, he's just completely out to lunch on this stuff, and it's kind of dumb. The thing that bothers me like the most about this movie is just how boring it is for most of it. A lot of stuff happens, but it's not really that serious.
Right.
I mean, it's just one thing after another. He's dreaming something about Freddy. He's dreaming this. He's dreaming that. Then some birds attack some people, and then like the toaster lights on fire. But all of it gets so muddled, right? That you don't even care. Like, you know that, oh, wow, this person got cut or this person got hit or these birds attack people, but any second now somebody could wake up and it's a dream. Or somebody just dismisses it and they go on with their lives, you know?
Yeah.
There's just no peril. There's no terror. There's really, like, no build. And they're trying, there's supposed to be some build. There's supposed to be some build here with Jesse because he's constantly complaining, something is, you know, happening to me. I don't know what it is. Everybody's constantly concerned about it, but nobody does anything. Everybody does is say, there's something wrong with Jesse. There's something wrong with Jesse. You know, there's something wrong with Jesse. Jesse, is there something wrong with you? It happens so much up to about the last 20 minutes of the film. I just put my head in my hands and go, all right, we all know there's something wrong with Jesse. Now, when are we going to get to the good stuff?
Right, and exactly, and Lisa she knows there's something wrong, and like he's telling her about all this stuff, like he's telling her about Freddy, and that he feels like he's losing his mind, and he thinks that Freddy's taking him over, and she just keeps saying, "Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it." Like, okay, we're talking about it. Like, that is not helping me. Oh gosh, and the other thing that makes it kind of boring is that Freddy is hardly in this movie.
Yeah,
you know, he's about in this movie as much as Pinhead shows up in a lot of the later Hellraiser sequels. Like, he just pops in every once in a while to be like, kill people for me, and then he's gone. Like, he doesn't really seem to be that threatening of a force. I mean, things happen, but we don't get the typical... Well, first of all, we don't get any dream kills at all.
No.
None. Not a single dream kill in the whole movie. Mm-hmm. The first, I guess, real kill we get is when Jesse has another nightmare, and then, like, he goes and stands at the kitchen sink, and lightning strikes the dishes. Like, what? Okay.
And then the very next shot is him walking outside in the rain. Like, what?
In the rain.
What drove
the pouring
him?
Rain.
What drove him to walk outside in the rain? And you're going, okay, this is some weird dream sequence again, so I'm not going to take it seriously.
Yeah, but it's not.
No, it's not. He ends up in this S&M bar, and he's saddles up to the bar, and he asks the bartender for a beer, and the bartender's Bob Shea, and he's all dressed in leather too with spikes on it. It's kind of funny. And as he pours himself a beer, the Coach Snyder, saddles up next to him, puts his hand on him, and then the next thing you see, he's making him do laps in the gym. Mm-hmm. Now, if this is not a dream, this whole situation's just really bizarre.
Yeah.
Coach runs into him in the middle of the day, takes him back to the school at night, and makes him run laps in the gym, and then sends him into the showers. And the coach...
Yeah, meanwhile, while he's decked out in his leathers at school.
Exactly. That's right.
I hope your administration doesn't find out about this, because they're going to frown upon it.
I hope they don't have, like security cameras there. But the funny thing about it is, like, the coach never comes on to him.
No.
Like, you think that they're setting this up for some situation where he's being molested or he's in peril from the coach, but that is absolutely not it at all. Mm-mm. The coach, even though he's in his leathers and has sent him to the showers, is busy in his office in the dark, walking around chewing gum. and
Yep.
starts getting attacked by a bunch of balls.
Yeah, big balls, little balls, balls everywhere. Balls in the face.
So many balls. More balls than were in that bar earlier. And the funny thing is, it's like through this whole thing, the coach is just like matter-of-factly looking around. He's like, that's interesting. I'm being attacked by balls. Eventually, some jump ropes that he had set out. I guess he was going to have him jump rope after he was done showering. Yeah. The jump ropes come to life and twist around his wrists and start dragging him out. And now he's freaked out. Drags him all the way to the shower. Strings him kind of up on the shower. His clothes all rip off, so he is bare, completely nude, facing the wall, up in a very, what do you call
Submissive
position. And the towels from the other room start magically flying in and whipping him in the butt. Oh man, it's
and you see, I mean, it's in all its glory, and you see his butt get bright red.
Sore
from these
makeup
whippings.
artists were coming in to take care of this.
Yeah.
It's true. And he's and the whole time Jesse is just standing there, kind of looking at it.
Yeah, also nude in the shower.
Yeah,
so now they're just hanging out naked together.
He's more fascinated by it than appalled. Let's just put it that way. But the mist comes in, and what steps out from where Jesse was standing is Freddy. So, again, we're going with this idea that Freddy has now been able to take over Jesse. And he comes up behind him, and he slashes the coach dead.
Yeah, in a different movie, I would actually think that this concept was kind of cool, because I really liked that imagery of Jesse standing there, and then the steam kind of slowly hiding him, and then as the steam kind of then dissipates again, then Freddy being there in his place. And then after Freddy kills the coach, then we cut back, and it's Jesse standing there. And does he have the glove on at this point?
Yeah, I think he does.
Because
he shakes it, and he freaks out, and he kind of takes it off.
And so, the suggestion, I guess, is that Freddy is possessing him, but it's also left a little bit ambiguous as to whether, at least at this point, as to whether Freddy is actually emerging and is actually there physically, or if it's just Jesse and this is kind of a projection of his mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It is ambiguous, and you never really know. And I would say, it's deliberately ambiguous, but it's just so inconsistent and clunky that it just seems like they don't even care. Right. And maybe that's, again, if you rush the script through and you rush the production through, you don't even bother with these things. There's just not a lot of care taken to really adhere to a specific idea or, obviously some kind of mythos. It's not even like an upgrade of the Freddy mythos. It's just like, we've got Freddy back, and we can throw in something about dreams and the glove and this kid getting possessed by Freddy. And that's kind of what the movie is. And so you can't really think about any of this too much, or else it all just falls apart. The police bring him home. This is how we know that it's not a dream. The police bring him home naked, deliver him to his parents, and he goes upstairs. That's when his dad asks him, I just have two questions for you. What are you on and who's giving it to you? Mm-hmm. And he just looks at him and is like, Dad, I'm not doing drugs, and goes upstairs.
In the night, he has another dream, I guess. Again, we don't know if it's a dream or if this is really happening, but he hears some rumbling in his drawer, and he opens it, and the glove is moving on its own. And then he walks to his sister's room, and she's skipping rope, and it's got to be a dream because it's in the slow
motion,
weird lighting and the fog and stuff. And she's doing the 1-2 Freddy's coming for you whole thing, which, let's get that in there.
Yeah.
Just this once real quick to remind people. And then in the morning, Jesse and his dad have a fight, and the toaster catches on fire, even though it wasn't even plugged in. The dad's like, that's weird. It wasn't even plugged in. Well, yeah, that is pretty freaking weird.
Don't you think this would be something you care about? A little bit more than that. So after the toaster incident that apparently Dad's willing to write off, we go to the power plant. This is this part of the mythos from the first movie, or was this added in? Because I thought it was the boiler room at the school.
I thought the same thing, and I was asking myself the same thing. I don't remember there being anything about a factory, but then I was thinking, In the remake of the original, which is awful, by the way, they do chase living Fred Krueger around factories. I don't know. And it doesn't much matter, but it actually makes for kind of a cool set piece later in the movie, because this factory really kind of serves as this enormous boiler room.
Or actually, in a lot of the movies in the series, the boiler room, which isn't normally that big, happens in the dream world, right? So it's always this huge, elaborate set piece anyway. Again, this movie, without much of it taking place in the dream world, creates this big, elaborate boiler-type set piece. So it's an interesting difference between the two kinds of films. Anyway, she has done some research at the library, which thankfully we didn't have to see. And she just presents it to Jesse, matter-of-factly. Lisa does.
Do you remember in the diary when Nancy said she kept finding herself in a boiler room? Well, Fred Krueger worked here. It's an old power plant. Here.
What is all this?
I did some reading on our friend Fred Krueger. Fred Krueger kidnapped 20 kids and brought them here and killed them.
They're walking around this empty factory, and suddenly their eyes gaze upon what? A closet. And suddenly, Jesse is terrified of this closet. And he walks very slowly towards it. And for no really good reason why they're terrified of this thing, to be completely honest. It's just sitting there. And he walks up to it, and he opens it, and there's a rat inside, which freaks out Lisa.
Yeah, so they just hold each other very tenderly.
This is funny. Like, I think at this point in the film is when you realize, like, they are friends, but there seems to be absolutely no romantic connection between the two of them. Like, it seems like she wants there to be, but he's either disinterested or he's just so occupied that he either can't see it or he just
is gay.
Yeah, or is gay. Thank you. True.
I really don't remember. I feel like there's more of him being tormented and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. There's a lot of what's the matter with Jesse, let's put it that way.
Pool party. Pool party, and all these good-looking 20-something teenagers are there, and at first, her parents are like chaperoning, and the dad's all goofy and playing old music and running the barbecue and telling those rascally kids to not do cannonballs in the pool and stuff. But eventually, the mom lures the dad upstairs with sex, and so then the kids, they turn on the good music and they whip out the beer, and now they can really have fun. But Jesse's not having any fun, so he gets up from his corner and goes and walks into the changing room, and Lisa is knocking on the door. Jesse, let me in, and he finally does, and he's like, I'm just not feeling this, I'm gonna go home. And she's like, but let's talk about it.
Jesse, why won't you talk to me? What is it? Jesse, what's wrong?
Because she just wants to talk about it.
And that's when he goes into a big spiel about there's something inside of him nobody can understand. They have a makeout scene, which goes okay up until this giant Freddy tongue shoots out of Jesse's mouth. And she doesn't notice it, but he notices it, and it disturbs him enough that he jumps up and runs out.
And jumps into bed with Grady.
Yeah, the next shot is of him leaping onto Grady, and Grady's like, what's going on? And he flips on the light, and he's apparently run to Grady's house and made it to his bedroom.
Something is trying to get inside my body.
Yeah, and she's female, and she's waiting for you in the cabana. And you want to sleep with me.
It's pretty on the nose.
In classic Nightmare on Elm Street form, the person who's being tormented says, you have to watch me sleep. Don't go to sleep. And then Jesse goes to sleep, and Grady tries to stay awake for about 5 minutes, and then he goes to sleep too. And instantly, Jesse is overcome. And this is, I guess, one of technically the cooler scenes to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's this cool, I guess you would call it a transformation that happens.
It's like, I guess this is happening in the real world, right? It's not the dream world?
Well, I guess. I mean, it made a point of showing them both fall asleep, but then from this point on, everything...
Yeah.
I don't know if they're dreaming, but and they're like sleepwalking. I don't know. It's so unclear.
Well, I mean, if this were truly the real world, there'd be nothing left of Jesse because Freddy just basically bursts out from inside of him and the rest of Jesse falls apart, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a movie. So anyway, he kills Grady through the door.
And then is really upset about it.
Yeah. It's so strange. Like, you know... well, it's so dumb. First of all, it's dumb, and then it's strange. Like, it's dumb in that Grady, all he can do, this big, beefy, burly guy, all he can do is cower against a door and bang against it like it's locked from the other side. Dad, help me. And at some point, then his parents come to the other side of the door, and they're banging on it. Open the door. Like, nobody can open this door, apparently. So then he stabs Grady, I guess, through his... Okay, he penetrates Grady through the door. We'll just go all in with this, and cuts through him, and then jumps out the window and runs back to the house. So he's able to escape, and when he gets back to the house, Lisa has decided she's going to leave the party and go to his house. So she happens to meet him just as he comes in, and he's got blood all over his hands, he's got blood all over his thing, and the whole time Lisa's just standing there going like,
Jesse, my God, you're hurt. What happened?
I killed Grady.
What's wrong?
Lisa, I killed Snyder.
Jesse, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about? What? Jesse, come on, just talk. Just tell me what's going on.
Yeah, she's completely nonplussed. Right. She's not bothered. She's not concerned, not bothered at all. She's just worried about him. Which is so dumb. I mean, like you said, literally, he's covered in blood.
He's inside me, and he wants to take me again.
Outside, the pool starts to boil, and hot dogs start exploding like firecrackers, and meanwhile, Lisa tells Jesse, I read more of Nancy's diary, and at the very end, the last entry said, I realize now that he's pure evil, and we've been giving him power through our fear and through our screams. And so she's like, don't be afraid of him, you can fight him. And he's like, no, I can't, he's coming. And then he turns into Freddy. Like, he tries to fight him a little bit, but not really. So he turns into Freddy, and Freddy is just kind of menacing Lisa and taunting her.
Throwing dishes at her.
Yeah, knocking over tables and things, I don't know. Then Freddy, in Jesse's voice, says, kill me, Lisa. And so she's got this big butcher knife, and she kind of like gingerly stabs him a few times, and nothing happens. But I guess her willingness to do that inspired Jesse or something, so he like turns and jumps out of the glass door and disappears.
Yeah.
Which is weird. And so then everything that was going on weird at the party stops, and everybody's just kind of looking around like, what's going on? Until Freddy pops out of the ground, and then just chaos erupts. He starts chasing around these teenagers. He's killing some of them. He's just kind of taunting other ones. There's this hilarious part at one point where this one kid's like, dude, just calm down. It's okay. I'm here to help you. Nobody's going to hurt you.
Nobody's going to hurt you.
Yeah. And Freddy's just looking at him like he's an idiot. But this whole scene makes no sense.
No.
It makes no sense. How is Freddy out in the real world? Dozens of people see him. You know, everybody can see him. Eventually the parents come down, they can see him. The dad tries to shoot him, but Lisa stops him because he's really still Jesse on the inside. And then Freddy runs away.
Yeah.
That scene, I mean, I don't know what more there is to say about it, but it's just dumb. And it's so funny, like I was trying to take notes, and so I was pausing to write things down and pausing it and looking at the looks on these people's faces when they were reacting to Freddy. It was just one of the funniest things I'd ever seen.
I particularly enjoy that part where Freddy's got all of the teenagers cornered against a shrub. And he's just staring at them from probably, 20 feet away, and they're all just stopped and staring at him too. I think that's the point at which the kid comes out. It's like, dude, It's okay. But like, really, like nobody in this reacts like, okay, so there was all this mass chaos and he's chasing them all around and they all decide to suddenly corner themselves behind a shrub and stop.
Well, that's because of another totally nonsensical thing is that he's obviously controlling reality, because like every time they try to climb over a fence, like this huge fire shoots up, and like he can electrify the fence, so like he's got them stuck in there. Like, what? How is this? It doesn't make no sense. There's no continuity from the first movie whatsoever. But okay, but then that leads up really to probably my favorite part, which is the finale. I guess Freddy, who's really still Jesse on the inside, looks at Lisa and appreciates the fact that she didn't allow her dad to shoot him, so he runs off. And somebody's like, where would he go? And Lisa gets a knowing look, and she jumps in her car and she drives back to the factory, where apparently now this is Freddy's entire lair. And as she walks in, she's confronted by some like hellhounds, which are obviously just like Rottweilers with like Garbage Pail Kid masks on.
Oh my gosh. They really pulled all the stops out for that effect, that's for sure. Those poor dogs.
I know you could tell they did not want those things on their heads. I mean, it looked kind of menacing, but it looked, like they're just trying to shake these things off.
And you could tell they didn't want them on the screen very long either. There's like a couple really quick shots in her reaction, then she just walks past them. I guess the idea is that she's going with that idea that if you're afraid of him, then you give him his power. So if you're not afraid, you can just do anything.
Right. And that's kind of the weapon that she's going in with. But like, it's just so weird. Like, she's walking around this factory, and it's a cool set piece. It's big. I'm sure a lot of it is probably matte paintings or something, but it looks cool, and she's walking around, and then she like encounters a hell rat, and then the hell rat gets eaten by a hell cat, and then she's running around, and finally Freddy shows up, and they have this confrontation where basically it's not entirely dissimilar to Nancy's solution at the end, where she just says, I'm not afraid of you. That's part of it. But it's also very lovely in that, like, Lisa is just like, Jesse, I know you're in there. I know you're in there. Fight it, fight it. And finally, she's like, I love you.
And love wins the day.
You can tell, Robert Englund is doing his best to show the fight going on inside him, and
but it's hard to do with all that makeup on.
And so finally, as a last resort, she like gets down on the ground with him, and he raises up his glove, and she grabs it, and then she makes out with him, with Freddy. And so then Freddy erupts into flames. And burns, and it looks like there's just, like his ashen remains there or whatever, and Lisa is crying and crying, and then from the ashes emerges Jesse, and he's apparently okay.
Reborn.
And, yeah.
He's come to terms with his his identity.
Right. He came right out of there. And so, potentially that would be the end, but of course they were hoping that this would be a franchise, so they had to give us another, little twist ending or whatever. And it's very similar to the first movie in that Jesse is going off to school and his mom is saying goodbye, and they're so happy that everything's over. In fact, Jesse's so happy that he does like a little victory leap as he runs towards the school bus. And they get in the school bus, and he sits down next to Lisa, and this whole time I'm thinking, where did his car go? Like,
I know.
They've been driving to school. Yeah, they've been driving to school this whole movie, but I guess now they're riding the bus. But anyway, they're like, "Oh, thank God it's all over." And Lisa's like, "Let's just not talk about it." And so then he starts to kind of notice that this is reminiscent of that very first dream that he had in the beginning, and the bus is going fast, and he starts to freak out, and Lisa's trying to calm him down, and he yells for the bus driver to stop, and the bus driver does, to pick somebody else up, and they think everything's fine, and they've got this friend who we haven't mentioned because she's totally inconsequential, but she's like leaning up over the seat behind them, and she's like, see, it's all over, and then Freddy's arm pushes through her chest, and everybody screams, and the last shot is the shot of the bus flying off into the desert like it had in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you described her last encounter with Freddy like it was this, kind of like it was this great battle, and it sounds like that. It should have been like that, but it's so boring. Like,
boring.
I felt like that the whole movie. It's just so boring for most of it. Even when Freddy's attacking the teenagers, you're just more confused than anything. And it's just, it's clearly a rushed job. I mean, more than anything, it's clear that not a lot of thought was put into this film. They had to get another Freddy movie out, and so they did. And this is it. And it was enough, anyway, to give them another Freddy film and more money so that they could make a third one, which is arguably, one of the best in the franchise.
Definitely.
And then it's because it really nails down the mythos, where this one, kind of went off the rails. And I think they were more consistent about it from then on, which is another reason why this is seen as sort of the black sheep, is that it doesn't really fit in with the other Freddy movies in tone, with the mythology, and with the comedy, with the scares. Even the makeup is different, But again, it's a second movie. So, some of this stuff you got to give a pass to, but...
Well, and it kind of feels like the bastard stepchild of the franchise. I mean, yes, Freddy is completely, not entirely, but very different in nature. He looks different because the original makeup artist didn't come back, and so the makeup design is different. I mean, he's still recognizable as the character, but he looks different. It's the only movie in the franchise that doesn't make use of that classic score that you always associate with these movies. I mean, from this point forward, that score opens every single movie, I think, and is continuous throughout. And I missed that. I love that. It's signature to the franchise. And this is also the only movie in the series where, aside from Robert Englund, aside from Freddy, no characters appear who were in the previous film, nor do any of the characters from this film appear in any of the other sequels. So it really is just kind of a standalone thing. And as an oddity in that way, for fine connoisseurs of horror like us, I would say see it. It's oddball. You kind of got to see it. But if let's say one of my students, somebody who, is too young to have appreciated these when they came out, if I were to recommend the series to them, I would say start with 1, skip 2 entirely, go directly on to 3, and then go through from there. Because there's nothing in this movie that affects the continuity of the rest of the series in any way.
And it kind of neuters Freddy in a way, just by placing him in this situation where he's possessing another kid, but the flip side of that is this kid has also possessed him, right? So when Freddy is big and bad and evil and going around terrorizing people, there's really this scared little kid inside of him that can break out at any moment if somebody shows enough love or somebody yells at him, And so then you get this tension on Freddy's face. And like you said, he's doing his best to show this conflict through all this makeup, but it turns Freddy into, I don't know, it takes his character away. He's not as threatening in that way because he's set up with this character with all this internal conflict. And there's just so many stupid, dumb things that happen in this film. And it's not fun stupid, it's like roll your eyes stupid.
Mm-hmm.
The little parrot, the little bird attacking people and exploding. The toaster lighting up.
The demon dogs,
Demon dogs and demon cats, that's the worst they could come up with for her to encounter in this giant, factory of horrors. It's,
Well, and just, I just think that, eliminating the entire dream aspect just doesn't make any sense, and it takes away so much from it. And, fortunately, I really think that this movie could have killed the franchise. But fortunately, I guess, based on the popularity of the first one, it did well. It did twice as well as the first one. So they were able to go ahead with 3, which was Dream Warriors, which is great. And they brought back Heather Langenkamp, which I think was the only thing to do. And then, the movie kind of took a different course from there. From there, it kind of started to rely more on the humor. Freddy became a much more central character. I read a quote from the guy who played Patton, his name's Patton, the guy who played Jesse, and he said that if you notice, in the first movie, Heather Langenkamp gets first billing. In the second movie, he gets first billing. And it's not until the third movie that Robert Englund starts to get top billing, and then he keeps it from then on. And in fact, they almost didn't cast Robert Englund in the role for the second movie, because he demanded a raise, as well he should have. I mean, that's, that only makes sense. The movie did well. He's a key component of that. They should have thrown more money at him, but they didn't want to. And so they actually filmed for 2 weeks without him until the director was like, we've got to get Robert back. It's just not going to work without him. And, then I love the whole series. It's fun. It's such an integral part of my childhood and growing up. I was always so excited, and it may not have been the best idea from a quality perspective, but this was kind of an event. It was kind of like Saw. A new one came out every summer, and or whenever they came out, once a year. And I was always excited, and I wanted to go see them in the theaters, and I did. And they range in quality. 3, I think, is great. 4 was pretty good. 5 was not quite as good as 4. 6 was awful. Mm-hmm. And then they got around to New Nightmare, which I also thought was really good. Top 3 at least.
Oh yeah.
So I'm glad that the movie didn't kill the franchise, because I think that it could have. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it from any kind of critical perspective, it sucks.
Well, and for his part, Mark Patton seems to have an uneasy peace with this movie. I guess a lot of water has kind of gone under the bridge by now, and the fact that it has gained this cult status, if you will, then he's been able to embrace it more and kind of enjoy that popularity that he wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So I think he feels like at some level, even though he blames this film for all of his bad experiences in Hollywood and
he left acting. I mean, this was it. He quit. Yeah. He went into interior design. And I think part of the reason that he's embracing it a little bit more now is because people are embracing him, and he's getting, a lot of positive attention, and he's being kind of celebrated as kind of being a groundbreaker. Even if he was an unwitting groundbreaker, he kind of was, and people appreciate that, and I think that he does too. And, he, I don't know who produced it, but he participated in a documentary called Scream, Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. And it was about his story and getting the story about this movie.
Have you seen that?
I haven't. I'd like to. I feel like I read so much about it that I feel like there's not going to be any revelations that I don't already know, but it would be kind of interesting to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, it would be. Now, if you see Never Sleep Again, I think, which is the documentary that goes into the box set, I think they address this considerably in that, and they interview a lot of the people involved. They do. So you can catch that as well, and it might even be up on YouTube, actually.
Maybe.
Yeah, so... Yeah, if you're interested in diving more deeply into the production of this film, there are things out there you can check out.
Well, and that's really more interesting than the film itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you again for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. Remember that we are on Facebook. We have our website, and you can leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. We did crowdsource some ideas for our theme month of 2, so some of you are going to see some of the movies that you suggested. We are going to continue next week and beyond with sequels in Notorious 2s. Also, don't forget you can go to the website, 2guys.red40.net, and read some written horror reviews randomly up there as well every Thursday. Until next week, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With 2 Guys and a Chainsaw.